Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's Scientists in Action, Bizarre Beasts and Dinosaurs of Madagascar. My name is Amanda. I'm one of the educators here at the museum. I'm standing here with a couple of our Earth scientists, 3 levels below the main floor of the museum. So we're pretty deep. We're in the caverns of the museum. This is Sierra, and we have Dave. They're going to drop a few knowledge bombs on Madagascar creatures from prehistoric times. But before we do that, before I turn it over to them, just a few housekeeping items. If you are one of our on-camera schools, we're going to ask you guys to keep your mics muted until we're ready for questions about 15 to 20 minutes from now. When we are ready for those, we will call out your name. At that point, you can pop on, state your name, and say that question nice and loud for us. If you are not on one of our on-camera schools, we do have an open chat, so feel free to type any of those questions that you all might have into the chat, and we will do our best to get those questions answered for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave and Sierra.
Cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Sierra Swenson. I'm an assistant collections manager here at the museum, so I work here in this basement floor. My job is mainly to keep things organized, specifically for the specimens from Madagascar that we're going to be talking to you about today.
And I'm Dave Kraus. I'm a scientist here, and since I'm a scientist who studies fossils, I'm a paleontologist. I wanted to do something a little goofy and show you that I actually have a lab coat, and it shows that a dinosaur on my lab coat, so that makes me a legitimate dinosaur paleontologist. But we're here basically to show you some exciting discoveries that we've made over the last 30 years, all from the island of Madagascar. And they're all behind us. Sierra and I are going to show them all to you and explain them to you and why we're excited about them. But before we do that, I know that Amanda has some poll questions for you.
I sure did. Let's get this party started with poll number 1. Our first poll is: Madagascar is an island that is near Africa and is A, half the size of the state of Colorado, B, about the size of the state of Colorado, C, more than twice the size of the state of Colorado, or D, larger than the United States of America. Here we go. Here are the results. It looks like, 40% think that that Madagascar is more than twice the size of the state of Colorado, and 40% think that Madagascar is half the size of the state of Colorado.
Wow, it's a tie. And that's really cool. It happens to be that the 40% of you that said it's more than twice the size of Colorado are correct. But I know why the rest of you thought that it might be smaller than Colorado. And that's because when you have a map of Africa and you have Madagascar next to it, Madagascar looks really, really, really small. But it's not, because Africa is a huge continent. Madagascar is about 1,000 miles from north to south. It's a really huge island. It's one of the very poorest countries in the world, and it has about 30 million people on that island.
All right, let's leap right into poll number 2. My favorite prehistoric creature, Beelzebufo, a 10-pound fossil frog from Madagascar that may have eaten baby dinosaurs, is sometimes called A, devil frog, B, basketball-sized frog, C, dino-eating frog, D, armored frog from hell, or E, all of the above. right, coming in at 40%, we have armored frog from hell.
Ooh, okay. So you're kind of right because the actual answer is all of the above. All of those names could apply to this guy, Beelzebufo. So this is a big artist recreation of what this frog may have looked like living in Madagascar. And Dave is going to talk to you a little bit more about how it's earned each and every one of those names in a few minutes, but you can see he is ginormous. So that is the key reason.
All right, and our final poll. Today we're focusing on fossils from the end of the late Cretaceous period. How old would that make them? A, 267 million years old. B, 167 million years old. C, 67 million years old. Or D, I have no idea. Wait, a last second change. 50% think that 167 million years old is how old these objects are.
Well, that's interesting. 167 million years ago is still in the age of dinosaurs. It's a long time ago. But these fossils that we're going to show you today are from the end of the age of dinosaurs. So that makes them 67 million years old. And before we kind of launch into describing each and every one of these wonderful animals that are behind us, I have to kind of throw a question back at you, which is that what animals live on Madagascar today? And most of you are probably going to say lemurs. And if you know anything about lemurs, you know that they are unique to Madagascar. There are other things like tomato frogs and leaf-nosed snakes and tenrecs, and all of them are unique to Madagascar. We wanted to find out whether or not 67 million years ago, whether the animals that lived there then were unique to Madagascar as well. And I'll give you a hint, the answer is yes. And so almost everything that we found was brand new to science, and we got to name them for that reason. But again, before we talk about the animals, I'm going to ask Sierra to basically describe where we are and why we're here.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so like Amanda said earlier, we are on the very bottom floor of the museum, and this is one of our collection spaces. And this space was specially built to house specimens for us in earth sciences. So you can see most of what we have is obviously fossils, but there are other collection spaces here at the museum too, and maybe you've seen a scientist in action with one of them. So we've got zoology, anthropology, archives, all different kinds of things. And this facility lets us control the temperature and humidity very specifically so that we can keep our specimens safe. Because, you know, bones, clothing, fur, other things all need to be at a specific temp and humidity so that they don't degrade over time. So that's part of what makes this area very special. And this is also where I primarily work. So even though I am also a paleontologist like Dave, I went the route of working in collections at a museum. So what I do, like I said earlier, is I keep things organized down here. I make sure things are labeled and put in the right places so that they can be found very easily by other people. And it's a very important job that maybe some of you will be interested in, even if you're most interested in paleontology. So that's kind of a little bit about me and the area that we're in. And now maybe Dave can do a little bit about the Madagascar project, and we can talk about some cool animals.
Yeah, like I said, one of the big questions we had was whether or not the animals that lived in Madagascar back at the end of the age of dinosaurs were as strange, as unique, as bizarre as the animals that live there today. And we found out that that was the case. And we're both going to use examples to show you how different the animals are from the animals that live today on Madagascar, as well as how they differ from other animals elsewhere in the world. And I'm going to start off with the animal that Sierra introduced, which is Beelzebufo. We initially found just little pieces of bones of Beelzebufo, and we knew it was a frog just because of the anatomy of frogs that we know. And but we hadn't named it yet. And so we just called we said these pieces of bone came from the frog from hell because it was so big. It's arguably the biggest and heaviest frog that ever lived. And it's not related to any frogs that live on Madagascar today. There's about 500 species of frogs that live on Madagascar today. This frog has nothing to do with it. It's not an ancestor to any of those frogs. And we ended up naming it Beelzebufo because Beelzebub means the devil and Bufo means toad. So it really means devil toad. And it's really interesting because it's mostly mouth and stomach. It's not like many frogs that live today that have big, long jumping legs. This was a sit and wait ambush predator. And what that means is that it just sat there camouflaged in leaves or sand or whatever else and waited for some animal to come walking by, and then it would just chomp it or stick out its big sticky tongue and pull it back into its mouth. And it probably ate everything from mammals to lizards to snakes. And we think that it was so big that it might have eaten even baby dinosaurs. So the concept of frogs eating dinosaurs is pretty cool. And we also know from a study that was done by some other people comparing how hard animals can bite, that Beelzebufo probably had the bite force, in other words, how hard it could bite, the same bite force as a tiger. That means it was a very vicious predator. This is a reconstructed skeleton of Beelzebufo. And one thing that you might notice here that is really odd is that it has a very armored skull for protection. It even has armor on its body, on its back. And those are used for protection. So even though it was a vicious predator, it was probably eaten by other things like dinosaurs and crocodiles. And Sierra's going to talk about the crocodiles that we found.
Cool. Okay. So we're going to move to the other side of the table and talk about crocodiles. So Madagascar at this time in the late Cretaceous had many different crocodile species. It's actually one of our most diverse groups of animals at the time. But I want to talk to you about two of my favorites. So the first one that we're going to talk about is Madagascarsaurus. And that's this really big skull right here. So this is the skull of Madagascarsaurus. And you can see on the side these amazing sharp conical teeth. If you zoom in, you can see they're slightly serrated on the side, and then they are these big cones that are really good for grabbing and crushing prey, very similar to a lot of modern crocodiles and their teeth. He would have been a very similar predator to modern crocodiles as well. Definitely an apex predator in their environment at the time. They were the biggest crocodile that lived on Madagascar during the Cretaceous. And you can see this is a full recreation of his head right here. This is a little 3D print that shows how everything fits together in those ginormous teeth. Of course, that's a miniature, but still pretty scary. And Madagascarsaurus has some cool features that make it unique. So even though it kind of occupies a similar environment and is still a big predator like modern crocodiles, it looks pretty different, especially its head. So you might have noticed with the little 3D print, this guy is got this kind of rounded, scoop-shaped head, especially the bottom. If you look at it, it's like, it would be basically like, yeah, a big scoop, kind of almost like a hippo today. Their heads look a little bit like this. And modern crocodiles are actually pretty different. So their heads usually taper into kind of a triangular shape with their nose being at the front. So that's one of the unique things about Madagascarsaurus. And a lot of our crocs have unique adaptations during this time period. So like Dave was talking about earlier, these animals were living on Madagascar during a time when it had already been an island for about 21 million years. So they developed some funky stuffs, like Mahajungasaurus has this big, weird, scoop-shaped head. And our next little guy, Simosuchus, has a lot of interesting things about him as well. Simosuchus, this is an artist recreation right here, is probably my favorite little guy from Madagascar. I mean, you can kind of see he's pretty cute. He's also a crocodile, but he's got this little like pug nose in the front, and he's got these cute little eyes on the sides of his head. And this is his actual size as well. So he would have been pretty small. A lot of people describe him as puppy-like, and I have to agree. I think he's pretty cute. And he is interesting not just because of the squish nose, which is very unique in crocodiles, and not just because of his size, but because he was a vegetarian crocodile. So this is a recreation of his skull. And if I turn it over and you zoom in really close on the teeth, you can hopefully see that they are shaped like little leaves. They have 3 little points on them, and this is very unique in crocodiles. Hardly any have ever been found to have teeth like this or be vegetarian, so Simosuchus is very special, and the teeth are part of how we know that he was a vegetarian, so these kind of teeth would not be good for capturing prey at all. They're much better for ripping off leaves and things like that, and even some dinosaurs like Triceratops have similar teeth to this. But in terms of a modern animal that has similar teeth to this, we actually have a great analog in the marine iguana. So this is a 3D print of a marine iguana skull. It's a little hard to see the teeth, so I have a blown up version here. Hold on, I'll grab that too. And they look just like Simosuchus's teeth. Just 3 little points. So very, very similar. And lizards today are the kind of animals that would have these sorts of teeth generally, but the marine iguana is our best analog for Simosuchus. So pretty cool. All right, Dave, you want to talk about some other cool teeth?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about theropods, the meat-eating dinosaurs. Everybody loves meat-eating dinosaurs, right? Well, we have a unique one from Madagascar as well, and it's this guy right here. This is the skull of Majungasaurus. And we've got other parts of Majungasaurus here, and you'll see that some things of it are also unique. So for instance, it's got a funny bump on the top of its head, and it's got tiny little arms. And I'm going to ask Sierra to point out those features on a reconstruction of Majungasaurus. So you can see the funny little bump on the top of its head. You can also see the tiny little arms that stick out below its big barrel chest. So if we come back to the actual reconstructions of the fossils, again, this is the skull. So you can see where the eye socket would have been. This is the lower jaw, the upper jaw. And I want to show you not just a reconstruction of it, but an actual skull. And it's this thing over here. So this is still in the original rock, and the top of the skull is along here. The eye socket would have been in here. And here are the lower jaws, and here are the neck vertebrae. And you can even see these long skinny things, which are neck ribs. We as mammals don't have neck ribs, but reptiles did. And so this is just a beautifully, beautifully preserved skull. We actually have the whole skeleton of this animal. And the surface texture of this bone is just like it would be in a bone that you might take off a dinner table. So well preserved. And that's really unique for something that is 67 million years old. And this is a cast. This is a reconstruction of an arm. So this is the forelimb, the tiny little forelimb. This is the actual size. This is the part of the shoulder blade. This is the humerus, which is the upper arm bone. And then the little bones here are the lower arm bones. And then these are the tiny fingers. These are even more bizarre than the tiny little arms on T-Rex, because in T-Rex, you have big claws on the ends of these fingers. Majungasaurus only has little nubbins on the end of those. So it's a real question. It's a real puzzle as to what these arms were actually used for. And as Sierra said, I want to talk about teeth a little bit. This is an upper jaw. So it's from this side, it's from the right side. And these are the teeth in that upper jaw. This is a cast. But I'm going to show you some real teeth. But the thing you should notice here is that some teeth are all the way out. Some of them are almost completely removed from the holes that they came out of. Others are in place. Others are just erupting. Others are coming out. This is really different than what we have in our mouths. So we as humans and other mammals have only two sets of teeth. There's a deciduous set, the baby teeth, and then there's a permanent set, the adult teeth. Well, dinosaurs and other reptiles did it differently. They just kept replacing their teeth. So in the lifetime of a Madagascarsaurus, there would literally be hundreds of teeth. They come in, they're used, and they're shed. And Madagascarsaurus is kind of different in the sense that its individual teeth, and I'm going to show you one here. So this is a tooth. You can see it hopefully up against my vest here. It's got a root down below, and then up higher is the crown. And so there's the crown, and that's the active part of the tooth. So these teeth come in from the bottom, push out the tooth from on top that has already been used. And we think Madagascarsaurus is unique in shedding its teeth. It actually replaced individual teeth every 56 days. So that's about every 2 months. And that's because it was probably chewing on bones more than most dinosaurs do. And that's the evidence that we have for that is a lot of tooth marks on other bones of other animals in the same fauna. The other thing, and it's too hard to see, but along the edges of these are serrations. In other words, little bumps that go along. Dinosaurs figured out before we did that serrations are good for eating meat. You know that your steak knife has serrations along it. Well, dinosaurs have serrations along their edges of teeth as well. So we're going to switch from theropods, which are the meat-eating dinosaurs, to the sauropods, which are plant-eating dinosaurs. And Sierra's going to tell you about that.
Okay, cool. Okay, so in Madagascar, we have thanks, Dave, two sauropod dinosaurs, two named sauropod dinosaurs. And we're going to talk today about Rapetosaurus. So Rapetosaurus is our biggest sauropod dinosaur. And you can tell from this beautiful humerus I have just about how big it was. And this isn't even as big as it could get. So this is a humerus. So on us, that is your upper arm bone, as Dave was explaining earlier. Rapetosaurus was a long-necked dinosaur. So you might know some other examples of long-necked dinosaurs, but it was also a titanosaur. So it was part of a specific group of these long-necked dinosaurs that grew to be very, very large. And it wasn't as big as some of its cousins. So maybe you've heard of Argentinosaurus, which is a very, very big titanosaur dinosaur, one of the biggest dinosaurs that's ever walked Earth. Rapetosaurus was sort of its smaller cousin living on Madagascar. And Rapetosaurus is pretty cool for some of the research that's been done on it. So it's an amazing dinosaur in its own right, but it's also the source of a lot of our understanding of dinosaur growth, because we find really big bones like this, but we also find really tiny bones like this guy. So here, I'll hold it up against my vest as well. This is a baby Rapetosaurus humerus. So the exact same bone as the big one I was showing you on the table before, but obviously this is much, much smaller. And it's finds like this that make paleontologists start to question, how did dinosaurs grow? How do we go from something this teeny tiny to something this huge? And it has now become a whole field of study about ontogeny and osteology. So that's bones and growth, or growth in bones rather. Looking at the inside of bones to try to understand how they're growing over time, whether it's fast or slow, if they grow more like us or more like lizards or more like birds. And they do things like make these slides. So this, I'll also hold this in front of the vest because that one might be even harder to see. But this is one tiny thin slice of a dinosaur bone, a Rapetosaurus bone, actually. And you can see it's got lots of different parts on the inside, and scientists can look at all the different parts of the bone in there and make determinations about how fast something was growing. And we know now that dinosaurs, at least sauropod dinosaurs, grew pretty quickly. So they'd go from this little tiny baby to this huge adult pretty fast, faster than people used to think they did. And that's pretty amazing. All right, Dave, want to hit mammals?
Alrighty. So let me talk about mammals. And in the context of the project that we have found over 30 years about 25,000 specimens of backboned animals, and that's a pretty phenomenal number. I'm really a specialized paleontologist. I study fossil mammals. And so I went to Madagascar trying to find fossil mammals. And so of those 25,000 specimens, there's only 14 mammals. 12 of those are just little bits of teeth or little bits of jaw. But then in 2010, we discovered this. This is a complete skull of a fossil mammal. And there's many things that are interesting about it. First of all, is its size. This is the second largest mammal that lived during the age of dinosaurs. But like all of the things that Sierra and I have been showing you, it's funky. It's different in a number of different ways. So one of the things is that it has this big flange on the side of its skull, and that's used for big muscles to attach for chewing. Using some techniques that we use in medicine today, we've looked inside of the skull and we see that the brain is very different than in most mammals as well. Again, because all of these animals that we find are new to science, we get to name them. We named this one Ventina because we found it in a big plaster jacket that we thought was filled with fish. And then when we did a scan of it to look at the inside, we saw a skull of this. And that was what I had been looking for about 15 years up to that point. And I was so excited to see this inside the scan. I didn't sleep for 2 days. So for that reason, we named it Ventina, which literally means luck in the Malagasy language, in the Madagascar language. And this is the reconstruction of what Ventina might have looked like. So it was big, probably about the size of a beaver today. And from the outside, it doesn't look that strange, right? But if you look at the skull itself, it is quite different. And then to top things off, remember we had 12 just fragments of teeth and isolated bits of jaw. Then we found this skull, and then we found that, which is almost a complete skeleton of another fossil mammal. Belongs to the same group of mammals as Ventina, but it's really, really weird. For one thing, it's got more parts of the backbone than any other mammal living today or extinct that we know of. It's also pretty big for a Mesozoic mammal. Most Mesozoic mammals were the size of shrews or mice or rats, but this thing was much bigger. And it's got things on the skull that we have no idea what they were used for. So there's holes on the top of the skull. We don't know what those holes, what passed through those holes. And because it's so unique and because it was new to science, we got to name that one too. And we used a Malagasy word and we used a Greek word, and its name is Adalatherium, but in Malagasy and Greek, that means crazy beast because it's a really crazy beast. So those are kind of the bones and the reconstructions that we have, but I know that Sierra wants to show you something that is not bone that we think is very interesting too.
Yes, I do. So this is something that not that many people think about when they think about paleontology, but it can give us important information, and that is coprolites. So a coprolite is a piece of fossilized feces or poop. I mean, it kind of looks like poop, doesn't it? Coprolites are really cool because they can give us a lot of important information about the environment that was around, what animals were eating. Even if you can't link the coprolite to the specific animal that pooped it out, like with these ones, we don't know whose poops these are. We can still look inside these coprolites and look for plant material, animal material, maybe even bugs, things that sometimes don't fossilize unless they're eaten. And that can tell us a lot about the environment. So they're pretty cool little trace fossils.
So that's a pretty quick overview of some of these animals. I'm sure that you have questions about these. We're happy to answer any other questions you might have about our Madagascar fossils or anything about paleontology that we can answer. And I think Amanda is going to lead that.
Yes, I am. Just a reminder, if you are not one of our on-camera schools and you have questions, go ahead and throw those questions into the chat and we can hopefully get those answered for you today. For our first on-camera school, let's do Clara H. Carlson Elementary in Elmont, New York. If you all want to unmute your mic, say your name really loud and your question really loud, and we can get that answered for you.
Hi, I'm Mustafa. I'm asking for why did you name the devil toad? Devil toad.
So why did you name the devil toad Devil Toad?
It's basically because we knew it was really, really big. We knew it was really vicious. And because when we first found little bits and pieces of bones, we thought we knew it was a frog. And so we just jokingly said, this has to be the frog from hell. And so we used the name of the devil, which is Beelzebub, in the name, and bufo means toad. So Beelzebufo together means devil toad.
Awesome, great question. How about the next one? Come on up to the mic, say your name really loud and your question. Clara H. Carlson, do you all have another question?
My name is Justin, and I was wondering how long could a dinosaur live for?
Oh, good question. How long could a dinosaur live for?
You know what? I don't know if I have a specific answer on, being a dinosaur was pretty hard. So a lot of them didn't live full lives, but I'm not sure about the exact lifespan of the longest lived dinosaurs. Dave, do you have ideas?
I'm not a
on that?
dinosaur paleontologist either, so I don't have a solid answer for you, but I will take off from Sierra's answer, which is that it was a tough life out there.
Mhm.
And of all of the sauropod bones that we have, and Sierra has arranged all of these sauropod bones in the back here, it seems that most of them are not full-grown adults.
Mhm.
So one of them that we have here is a pretty full-grown adult. We have another leg bone back there that is even bigger. But we think, based on some teeth, that Rapetosaurus got even bigger than what we know. So, my best guess is for some of these animals, they might have lived 20, 30 years if they did get past this difficult stage of predation.
Great question. Clara H. Carlson, we'll do 2 more questions from you all if you have them. Come on up to the mic. Say that name really loud and that question really loud.
It's on. Hi, my name is John. I was wondering what was the Madagascar related to?
Ooh, what was the Madagascarsaurus related to?
So Madagascarsaurus is part of a group of dinosaurs called the abelisaurids, or sometimes abelosaurids, depending on who you ask. And there were other dinosaurs that looked pretty similar in terms of kind of the small arm, big front chest, big head, big legs, sort of distant cousins to the tyrannosaurs. And just in general, most of the animals that lived on Madagascar in the late Cretaceous would have been more closely related to animals that lived in India at the same time, actually, because Madagascar was last connected to a landmass when it was connected to India. So it broke off of Africa first when the continent started to shift apart, and then broke off of India last and became an island. So I'm not sure of specific dinosaurs it was most closely related to. Dave might have that answer, but it would have been most closely related to ones perhaps in India or that kind of area of the world. And another abelosaur dinosaur you might know that, again, would have been a distant cousin, but Carnotaurus, the ones with the two horns on the front, were also abelisaurid dinosaurs. So a lot of people know those, and Majungasaurus is its kind of smallish distant cousin. And Dave, you might have a specific answer about other Indian dinosaurs, maybe? I don't know.
Sierra nailed it. I mean, there's an Indian dinosaur that is thought to be most closely related to it. But since she allows me this chance, I'm going to brag a little bit and say that Majungasaurus is by far the best preserved and most complete abelosaur that we have. And so we've been able to determine lots of different things about how it lived, how it ate, how it walked, and everything else that are useful for informing about how other abelosaurids may have lived and walked and so on and so forth. So we're very proud of our animals. We have about 6 or 7 skeletons, actually, of Majungasaurus.
All right, Clara H. Carlson, just in the interest of time, we're going to pop over to our second on-camera school. If you have another question, go ahead and throw that in the chat and we'll hopefully have time to get that answered for you. But let's head over to Compass Montessori. We'll do 2 or 3 questions from you all. Come on up to the mic. Say your name and that question really loud.
I'm Levi Peepergrutis. Why are the animals both then and now so unique?
I think that's something we've touched on a little bit, but the key thing is the island of Madagascar. So I was saying before, Madagascar broke off from Africa, I think about 165 million years ago, and then broke off from India about 88 million years ago. Is that right? So by this time, 67 million years ago, it had already been an island for about 21 million years. And in general, it's a kind of a known thing in biology, paleontology, that when animals are isolated on an island for a long period of time, they start to get kind of weird and funky because evolutionarily, like they're only interacting with each other, right? They're not moving to new places. They're not getting new inputs of genetic information. They're stuck in this one place. And so that's true of Madagascar today. Like Madagascar is the only place we find a variety of lemur species, for example, like Dave was saying earlier. And it was also true then because it had been an island for so long, then these animals had been isolated for so long that they just start to do weird things and occupy interesting kind of environmental spaces, like Simosuchus, for example, being vegetarian. Like maybe if the island hadn't been isolated for that long, we wouldn't have a small pug-nosed vegetarian crocodile because he would have had plenty of space to go be kind of a regular carnivorous crocodile somewhere else. Yeah, that's, I think, the general gist.
Cool. All right, let's get our second question from Compass Montessori.
I'm Jasmine, and how do you know what time period a dinosaur is from by seeing their fossils?
So seeing their fossils isn't always the best way to tell when the dinosaur is from, although it can give us some clues because we can look at, what kind of animals it might have been related to. But the key thing that paleontologists do is use a couple different dating methods. So the first one is called radiometric dating, and that's looking at the elements in the rocks. And there are certain elements like uranium that decay at a very specific rate into lead. So we can look at how much uranium versus lead there is in the rock and know the exact amount of time that has surpassed. And that can give us very specific dates. We can also use fossils to date in a different way than just looking at them. There are marine fossils all around the world that have very specific dates associated with them. So if you find them in your rocks, you can correlate them to these other fossils. So like little shells, bivalve, scallops, things like that. You find a specific one and you say, oh, I know this only existed from this time period to this time period. And that can help you narrow it down. And some help you narrow it down a lot. They're only in existence for a very specific range or in a very specific part of the world. And that's called biostratigraphy. So we can combine those two things a lot of the time to give us as specific of an answer as possible. In the case of Madagascar, we've used both to some extent. So some of the rocks around the layers that contain the fossils do have radiometric dates, and that helps us narrow it down. But also there are marine rocks kind of interfingered with the layers that contain these fossils, which are terrestrial. So even though these are terrestrial, meaning on land, the marine rocks in between, we can look at their fossils and make calls about the biostratigraphy, and those give us ages as well.
Great. All right, Compass, if you have one more question, go ahead, pop on that mic for us.
Hi, I'm Nick, and I know it's not actually possible to preserve soft tissues, but in theory, if you could preserve, or if soft tissues could be preserved through fossilization, what information do you think you could glean from that?
Well, so a lot of what we do is by comparing to modern animals. And so in the cases of things like lizards or mammals, they live today and we can make those comparisons. It gets more difficult with animals that are really, really unique and don't have any living representatives. But even with that, all backboned animals are kind of built on the same plan. And so we can use inferences from muscle markings on bones to figure out how big certain muscles were. And it just so happens that the preservation, I'm bragging again, is so good in these fossils that we have from Madagascar that we have some aspects of soft tissues that are preserved. For instance, we have on some of the bird fossils that we have, some of the claws, some of the keratin, the fingernail-like material is still preserved on those fossils. And that happens to be a beta keratin. We know that it's not like a human fingernail got dropped into the test tube because we have alpha keratin. And so we know that those tissues actually belong to those birds. And we've got other things like feather shafts that are preserved as imprints. And we've even had skin imprints. So we can get some ideas about some of the soft tissues of these animals.
Awesome. Really quickly, somebody wants to know, what's the name of the mammal with the crazy backbone again?
That's Adalatherium. Adala means crazy and therium means beast.
Awesome. Okay. We are almost out of time. If we didn't get a chance to answer your questions in the online chat, sounds like a great opportunity for y'all to do your own research and try and find those answers to those questions. But do you all have any parting words for any aspiring paleontologists out there?
Sure, I can go first. I think I would just say, you know, if you're interested in this and you want to pursue it, do as good as you can in school right now, but don't worry so much about your path being linear. My path to this museum has had lots of twists and turns, and even though I've always been interested in paleontology, it's not always what I've done for my career. And so if you go off and you do one thing and then you realize, hey, I actually want to study dinosaurs instead, way later down the line, definitely just keep pursuing what you're most interested in and put everything you have into that, and you'll be fine. Dave?
I'm going to give you a weird answer. So when I was growing up, I grew up from a very practical family, you know, about as farmers and ranchers and feeding the world, and all of that is terrific. And I love that background. And it was all relevant, considered to be relevant. Sometimes what we do is considered to be kind of esoteric and therefore not relevant. I find it relevant because a basic human condition is curiosity. It's what we all have. And we as scientists, maybe we're especially curious, but it's what drives me. The thrill of discovery, whether it's in the field, discovering a new fossil, in the lab, seeing something that nobody else has seen before, or just by thinking about it as I'm going to sleep at night. All that is part of discovery, and it's curiosity, and it is part of the human condition. And I don't worry about relevancy anymore.
All right, words of wisdom. And with that, we are out of time. Really quickly before I let you go, our next Scientist in Action is on January 23rd, and the theme is looking for life in the universe with our scientist, Kachun Yu. So make sure y'all get registered for that. And thank you all for joining us. Bye.
Everybody.
Thank you.